Hey, what's up guys, this is Krishna here. Welcome to this exciting tutorial on Houdini Axiom fire. What we are going to create today is a large gasoline fire that you typically would see if an aircraft full of fuel caught fire or a vehicle full of fuel caught fire. So there will be a lot of fire, a lot of smoke, etc. Before we proceed, I'd like to thank all of you who support me by subscribing to my channel, liking, commenting, as well as purchasing my files on gumroad.com. I really appreciate it. Without you guys, I wouldn't be here today. So thank you very much. This file will be available on gumroad.com as well. Please support me by purchasing the file. You would also get other fire tutorial files along with it, as well as the latest campfire file. Okay, without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so let's jump right into it. But before I do that, I want to point out that I'm not going to go too much into detail with how things work, because I've explained all of this in my realistic fire Axiom series. So please check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, let me first drop down a geo node here, and let's call this fire setup. Okay, and let's drop in a box. Okay, so before I proceed, I want to set up a camera here. Okay, so let me just control and hold and click on the camera so it comes up, and unlock this. Okay, because I'm going to adjust them all here. All right, I'm going to punch in the numbers that I already had, so it's set up exactly as the original video. Okay, so that'll be 0, 6, 40, and the rotation is so it's looking straight at the box. Okay, also want to check the view here. View focal length is 135 millimeter, and aperture is actually 50 here. Okay, that's pretty good. I know it's below the camera, but it's gonna be okay. Now we can adjust that for the time being, just to bring that down here. All right, okay. What I'm also going to do is just copy this Y value and paste it here, and divide this by 2 so that it stands, it actually sits on the ground plane. Okay. So first node is Axiom source shape. Okay. And by the way, this is Houdini 19.5.303, and Axiom is version 2.002. Okay. They are the latest versions, at least the production builds. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is I want to reduce the number of frames here for the moment. So I'm just going to change it to 48. Close it. I just want to see, how it behaves, and then I'm going to drop down an Axiom solver here. The Axiom solver, when you are using source shape, it goes into the second input. Okay. So here it is. And please note I have an RTX 3090, so if I change the division size to very low value, it's because my GPU can handle it. So be careful with that. If you have a decent GPU but not great GPU, then you're gonna have to pay attention to how much you're bringing this down. Okay, so for now, let me just hit play. All right, so it's working really nice. So I just want to start working on this now. Okay, first thing I want to change is the shape here. I want to change it to box, so it looks like a box. And then let's use the noise here so you can see what's going on. I'm going to bring the okay, maybe I have to stop this. Okay, so I'm going to bring the strength down to 0.2 and the feature also down to 0.2. Okay, so that way the box does look like it's full, because if you increase the feature size and the strength, you'll see that you lose it a lot. So okay, good. Alright, okay, so there you go. And then let's move on to the deformation noise, because it's very important to noise up the source, okay? If you don't do that, you're not going to get a good result. The source has got to be solid, okay? So again, I'm going to use noise. I'm going to leave the type at Perlin and change the strength to 0.2 and feature size to 0.8. These are numbers that I used previously, and it worked out really well for this particular setup. Of course, you can play around with it to check what's going on, okay? Or how it behaves. So there you go. Alright, looks pretty good. Let's move on to the velocity noise. I'm going to use noise here too. Okay, all I'm going to do here is increase the strength to 4. Okay, so I'm going to leave the rest of them as they are. So now you can see it's coming up to here. Let's say 48. It's up to here. Okay, and if I don't use the noise, it's up to here. I think it was just a little bit over. Okay, but it doesn't matter. It's gonna be okay. But say, for example, if I increase this to 40, you'll see there you go. You can see the impact of the velocity here. I don't want too much of that, so 4 is fine. And force, I want to change it to radial, and I'm going to leave it at magnitude 1. It's a subtle effect. So for example, if I change this to, let's say 10, let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, 100. There you go, you can see what's going on here, okay? So I just want a subtle amount. So every little subtle changes make a big difference at the end, okay? Okay, so what I also want to do is, say for example, if I now change this to like 120 or whatever, and play, you see this smoke is going beyond the camera frame, okay? Now, you can cut that out afterwards, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do is actually cut off any smoke that goes above the camera frame, so that we don't actually waste the voxels, okay? So the solver can perform efficiently. So what do I mean by that? I need to create a bounding box, basically, to cut off anything that goes beyond the camera. Okay, so I'm going to just copy this across, press and hold Alt and click and drag. You'll get this. Okay, so there you go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this, put it back to 0. I'm going to press enter here. Not the one there. I'll just template this instead. Okay, so I have this little thingy bob here. Okay, so I can pull this around. I'm just going to set this back to camp. Now I'm just going to lift it up to here. And I'm going to move this just where the camera frame is. Here is fine too, but remember this is extremely thin. Okay, so we need to extend it that way, and oops, that way too. Okay, I think that is pretty good. Here you go. So I'm just going to pull this up. So looking at 0, I'm just going to change these. So center is 4 and 0.5, and these ones can be 15, rounded off to 10 and 7. Okay, that looks good. So I'm going to create another Axiom source shape here. I'm going to leave it at box, but the type, I'm going to change this to sync and invert the shape. So what does that do? What it does is anything inside of this box will work, but anything outside of this box will disappear. Okay, and we're gonna have to merge these two together. Okay, let's run this now. Let me try it again, because the dissipation is coming into play. I want to kill that. There you go. So we'll be able to see better now. As you can see, it's being clipped here. Okay, so anything beyond that, it will not work. So if I just move it, it's not a collision, okay? Bear that in mind. It's not a collision. It just cuts off anything that goes beyond that. All right, that's what it is. Collision means that it'll bounce off of it. Okay, this is not a collision. All right, so I think the width is decent. I think we can change that later if we need to. Okay. All right, that looks good now. These are the numbers. Okay, so that is pretty good. Let's move on to the solver now. As I said, I'm not going to explain too much of what these are, how these work, because it's better off for you to check my previous tutorial. I've explained all of this in that one. Okay. So first tab, main. I want to change the start frame to 2. Okay, I want to start it at 2, not first frame. Yeah, it's up to you. I'll leave the substeps at 1. Division size. My final res would be 0.04, but I'm going to leave it at 0.6 for the moment. And the solver mode, I'm going to leave it at reflection single step. That worked really well for this particular setup. Okay, obviously it depends on what you're doing. This is a gasoline fire, which is different to your campfire, for an example. But it all depends on how the simulation itself, runs, and you got to experiment on that. But for this particular setup, reflection single step works beautifully. So performance, I want to change it to output after sim. So that just means that it will wait for the sim before it outputs. And this one will do the parallel sim and the output at the same time. Okay, so I want to change it to this. Previously, this was called memory efficient versus speed, I think. So memory efficient will be your output after sim, and parallel sim and output would be your speed. And I want to change it to output after sim, which basically is memory efficient. Okay, let's move on to the sourcing now. So we've got a bunch of stuff here: density, temperature, fuel, velocity, pressure, and color. Well, first of all, we're not going to use color. Okay, I'm going to bring that down to 0. And I'm going to change the density to 2 and temperature to 1.25. I want to give it a little bit of temperature, a lot of density, because in these kind of smokes, we're expecting a lot of smoke to come out. All right, that's why the density is 2. We're not going to use fuel. We're not going to use pressure. Okay, because basically pressure is for explosion type of sims. Fuel, we could have used it, but in this instance, I'm not using it. Okay, I'm using the temperature as my primary element. And obviously density as well, but temperature will drive the scatter to get the result and the look we need. Okay, so simulation tab, timescale. Usually I increase this to 2 for fire, or a little bit closer to 2, but in this instance I'm going to put it to 1.1. I want a little bit of speed, but not too much. What I'm going to do though is in post, after I render out everything, in post, for example, Aftereffects and compositing packages, I'm going to increase it by 25%. So it'll be coming out as a 24 frames per second. I want 30 frames per second speed, which is 25% more. Okay. The reason I'm doing it like that is because if you increase this too much, sometimes you lose a lot of detail or it doesn't behave as well. So 1.1 turned out to be the best number for this particular simulation. Okay, so dissipation, I don't want too much of this, so I'm just going to drop it down to 0.01. I want diffusion, but not too much, 0.5, maybe 0.05. Cooling rate, I want it to be really low. And diffusion, temperature diffusion is also 0.05. In my previous tutorials, you would notice that the fire, I increased the cooling rate because I want the fire to die fast. But in this instance, I'm not using that because this is a gasoline, huge fire. Repeating myself quite a few times here, but I don't want it to cool down that fast. Okay, but you'll see what happens. The way I do it is slightly different to the traditional methods. Okay, it's just at the end I'll do it like that. You'll see it. So I'm not gonna reduce the cooling rate. Okay, I'm not going to increase the cooling rate. I'm going to keep it at 0.01. So it takes a longer time to cool down. I'm going to set the buoyancy to 3 and the buoyancy tab, you can select which direction you want to go, but usually it's the Y direction, upwards. Okay, I'm going to, you know what, let me just try and hit this one here. Okay, as you can see, it's going up quite a lot now, so which is pretty good. So if I were to drop this down to 0 or -8, you know, it goes down. There, it all depends. So I'm gonna leave it at 3, so it goes up faster. Okay, I'm gonna enable wind, and it's currently going in the positive X direction, as you can see here. Okay, and that's the direction I want, but I want to change it to, I'm going to change the direction, X direction, to 2 and enable turbulence and leave everything at default. So now if I play this, you'll see it's going really, really fast. I don't want that. So I'm going to drop this down to 0.4. It goes somewhat like that. Yeah, that's more like what I want. Okay. Good, let's move. Let me just disable this turbulence here and bring this back down to, let's say, 60. Okay. So first is disturbance. I'm not going to use the force or viscosity. The difference between a wind and a force is a constant. Force is a constant effector. Okay, whereas wind is not. Wind can die out, but force is just going to be one throughout. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so there's the disturbance number 1. As you can see, it is a lot. Generally, for fire, you want higher turbulence and less disturbance. Okay, and for explosion, you want higher disturbance, less turbulence. That's really how it works. So as you can see, there's a lot of turbulence going on here. Okay, so I'm going to bring this down to 0.4 because that's the best number. You know, it worked out. Like, as you can already see, it looks much better, but we're going to make it even better. So I'm going to go to disturbance 1 tab here and click on the block size. I'm going to bring this block size down to multiply by 1 to making it smaller. Okay, so as you can see, you get little disturbances, you know, finer, very fine disturbance. Okay, and I want to use the cutoff field density, and I've explained these in the other tutorials. Okay, so check it out. And I want to change the control field to velocity because I want the disturbance to be affected by the velocity. Okay, and I want to change the velocity scale to 2. But if you click on set range, it'll actually give you the current velocity in there, but I don't want to use that. Anything above 2 will have full disturbance. That's basically why I set that to 0 to 2. Okay, so the when it slows down, the disturbance also reduces. That's the idea behind it. All right, good. Let's move on to disturbance 2. Okay, there you go. As you can see, it's already messed up our simulation. We don't want that, so I'm going to drop this down to 0.2. Okay, and the reason that is 0.4 and this is 0.2 is because the first one has a division size of 0.06. The second one, I'm going to multiply that by 2. Okay, therefore our block size will be 0.12. That's why the reduction in the strength over here. Okay, as you can see, this behaves a lot better. You have little detail and bigger detail. Okay, there you can see that right here, I think. And this time I want the cutoff field to be temperature, not density. I want to affect the temperature. Okay, well, you may ask me, how can I visualize temperature? I think the temperature is being outputted here. Okay, so if I use a volume slice here, and I'll change this to temperature. There you go. There's your temperature. Okay, and let me just go to geometry spreadsheet So there it is. Okay, so it's called density because it's called density here. If I change this to temp, it'll be temp here. Okay, so it's 0 to 9. Okay, at the moment. So that could change, obviously, but that's one way of figuring it out. All right, good. So I'm going to affect that temperature, and the cutoff is going to stay the same as 0.2. But the same as before, I'm going to change the control field to velocity and the input range to 0 to 2. Okay, all right, let's run this now. There you go. Subtle difference. So before that, it was like this, and now a subtle change to the disturbance. So it looks like that. Okay, let's move on to turbulence. So let me switch on turbulence 1. So you don't really see a lot of change here, but if I were to, let's say, make this 10, and you can see that it is having a significant impact. Okay, again, subtle change. So I'm going to keep it at 1. I think I'm going to reduce that later on, but let's check turbulence 1 here. Okay, so with turbulence 1, I'm going to leave everything at default. I do want to affect the density. Okay, and the control field, again, velocity, and I want to change the input range to 0 to 2. Okay, you can see set range is 0 to 12 really, but okay, so there it is. It's affecting a lot at the moment. What I want to do is I want to use the turbulence 2 as the one that has a bigger impact. Okay, so this one, I'm going to change it to 0.5. So it has less turbulence, and this turbulence 2 will have significant impact. Or at least I'll punch in a higher value to this one. Okay, I'm going to enable turbulence 2. And let's go to turbulence 2 tab. Again, just like previously with disturbance, I want to affect the temperature here, and I want to use the control field velocity 0 to 2. Okay, so let's play this now. I'm just going to enable this real-time toggle so it doesn't go as fast. Okay, so there you go. That looks pretty good, but I want to increase this to 8. So as you can see, you can visibly see what's going on here. There's the turbulence 2 has brought in some impact. You know, you can see it. Like, you know, if it was 0 versus this, as you can see there. All right, good. Okay, cool. Let's move on to confinement. So I want to enable confinement. Confinement gives small, very small details to the velocity. Okay, and I want to add that in there. Okay, again, these subtle changes will have an impact at the end. It will make a difference, a huge difference. So let's go to confinement tab, which is the last tab here. Again, I will use velocity here and 0 to 2 as the input range. Okay, let me run it. There you go. And without it, with it. Okay, I think you can see subtle difference there. So if I were to just, there are very subtle swirls going on in here. Okay, I don't know if you can see it, but I promise you it is happening. All right, it is happening. Right, I think it's time for me to bring this division size down to 4 so I can get more detail out of it. It's actually pretty fast. 3090 is, so I suppose why not? Okay, so let's move on to the next tab now. As I said, at the sourcing here, I'm not going to use fuel, therefore I will not be using combustion. Okay, so let's move on to the output tab. Output tab, the only change here is the velocity scale. It's 1/2, which is half. Now, I don't think you need to change this for Karma to get your motion blur, but for Redshift, you must change this to 1/1, otherwise it will not recognize it. We're not going to use Redshift today, but I will change it either way. Okay, that's the only change here. And the settings here, there's no change here. I'm just going to leave them all at default. All right. This is more like a simple setup than complex setup. I like to keep things simple as much as I can. All right. So I think we've got what we want here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch in a file cache, labs file cache. By the way, if you want to use labs file cache, you will want to. It's coming up with an error. Do you know what? I was going to say if you want to use labs tools, you need to install labs, but I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to use file cache instead. All right. Generally, if it is a simulation, I'll put it in sim and then /$pip name, and then this one I'll just leave it at your OS. Okay. So I'm going to change this to, let's say if you middle click on the base name here, you'll see it's file cache 1. So I'm going to change this to fire sim cache. So that base name changes here. All right, middle click again, it'll change back to $OS. All right, good. So let's bring in a pyro bake volume, because that's what we will be using for Karma. Okay, so there you go. I put that on and I got nothing. I'm just going to go to the last frame here, which is 60, so you can get a better look at it. All right, so there it is. I just wonder where this box, it's just right there. All right, fair enough. I was just wondering why it's clipping so high. Maybe I will bring that down a little bit, but anyway, it doesn't matter for the moment. Okay, so before I work on Pyro Bake, I want to just put in a light here. I'm only going to use a distant light. Okay, so basically a sunlight. So I'm going to hold control and click. It'll bring up that. Change it. There you go. It already looks much better. Right, I'm going to put these numbers in, which I played with previously. Okay, I'm just going to set these translates to 0. I think it's only the rotation that matters when it comes to the distant light. So X is negative 85 and Z is negative 120. So the light is sort of coming from this angle here. I know it's not sunlight. You can't have sunlight coming from there, but I like this kind of lighting, so I left it like that. All right. So see, if I were to change this to anything, it doesn't matter. It won't affect. With the sun, with the distant light, all that matters is the rotation, not the translation. Okay. The light itself, the intensity is 1, exposure is 0. That's fine. I'm not going to change that. All right, let's move back in. And in Pyro Bake Volume, first thing I want to do is increase the density scale to 2. Okay. By the way, we're going to use XPU. Okay. I'm going to set this up in, if you dive inside, I'm going to set this up in Pyro Shader and then move on to the XPU itself. Okay. Because the visualization, I don't think XPU is supported in the viewport visualization yet. I'm not really sure, but either way, you need to set something up here before, which you can use in XPU, as well as some elements will be captured from this Pyro Bake volume, which are not available in the XPU material itself. Okay, I'll explain that. I'll explain which parts are not available in XPU yet. It gets captured when you render it. Okay, so I'm going to increase the shadow density to 6, so you can see it gets darker, which is what I want. I'm going to leave this at default, and let's move on to the scatter. Right, so generally for fire, I don't tend to use scatter, but this particular one, because it's a large gasoline fire, again, I'm mentioning it, I do need scatter because fire just will not work. Fire alone just will not work, and I'm not going to even use fire. So for example, if I just check this and increase the source range or whatever, it's just going to look pretty bad. Okay, I'm going to reset that. I want to enable scatter, and I'm going to increase the intensity scale to 2500. Source range is an absolute critical element here. So this is 1.5 to 16. That's what I'm going to use. Now, if you click on compute range, it's going to bring you the numbers here. Okay. But for this particular setup, this is what worked. Sometimes you just need to play around with this source range to get the desired result you want. Okay. I'm going to leave the color ramp as it is, but I'm going to work on the blur and the masking shortly, which right now basically. So I'm going to use the blur steps. Okay. What does this do? When turned on, the intermediate scatter volume is blurred at several different scales. Okay, that's what it's basically for. So you get that scattery look around it. Okay, so I'm going to increase the number of blur steps to 3. You may want to watch here just so that you see. Well, you have to watch both locations here. Blur step fall off to 1.2 and filter voxel radius down to 8. Okay, so there you go. That looks pretty good, I think, at least for the moment. I'm going to leave the blur iterations and the downsample to 2x. If you put none here, you may have a hard time rendering as well as visualizing it on the viewport. I'm going to just leave it at 2x. With masking, I'm going to bring the mask center to 0.5. So the scatter is a lot more than what it currently what it was. 0.2 will give you less scatter. 0.5 will give you more scatter. Okay. That's about it, really. And I'm not going to change any of this here. Okay. I'm just going to leave it as it is. But what we are going to do is, if we're going to dive inside of Pyro Big Volume, and we're going to drop in XPU Pyro Preview, okay, where we will copy the information from here. So density scale is 2, so I'm just going to copy this parameter and paste it here. And it's the same with shadow density. I'm going to paste it here. Okay. Scatter. Let's see what we got in scatter here. So intensity scale, that's this one. I'll change this to, yeah, that one. Paste it there. And masking, mask center is 0.5. Oops. 0.5. And I'm going to okay, paste absolute reference, enable mask. And you can choose to copy the mask width as well, but we're not using that. All right. Okay, good. So you can see Karma preview with scatter, we do not have certain elements which are actually available on the outside here. So if I go in scatter, you see the source range, these blur steps, they're not available in the XPU itself, okay? But they will be picked up by the XPU engine, all right? That's what I mentioned earlier, all right? So that's what that is. That's why it's important to set this up here, all right? So once you're happy with how it looks, then we're straight into sort of rendering stage, okay? But with Karma, this is the beauty of Karma, that you don't need to really look at try to render things, because what you're seeing here is pretty much what you will get in the render as well. Okay, so I think I'll be happy just to leave it as it is at the moment and just move on to the next step. Okay, so I'm just gonna run through let's say 240 frames of this, and I'll come back. Okay, it's done now. I did 145 frames instead of 240, so there it is. I think it looks pretty darn good. Don't worry about the actual quality, because this is to do with the viewport itself. Viewport quality is obviously reduced so that you can play it properly, And let me just close this and I'll show you. If you press D here and go into texture, here is where you can limit your resolution. Okay, I've set it up to 512 because I have 3090, but yours probably gonna be at 128 or 256. I'm not sure, but anyway, that's there. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it. All right, let's move on to the next step. So we've got one box here, okay, and we're getting all this wonderful fire. But what we want really is a whole bunch of these boxes to generate that fire. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to put in a grid here. Okay, so let me choose that, and let me go into here and change the background to light so that I can see. Yeah, I think there's a viewport problem here. Not sure. Ah, there it is. Okay, all right, good. This is just the light. Actually, it's not a viewport problem. So there it is. So I'm going to set the grid size to 8 to 4. So it's got that. And if I look at the cam here, it's sitting right there. Okay, which is good. And I want to move the center to -3, 0, and -5. And this is because our fire is going to go that way. Okay, so I want to put this down here so that we can see the full flow of the fire. All right, good. I'm going to reduce the rows and columns to 2, 2 because we don't need anything more than that. I'm just going to move this to the side here. So what I'm going to put down now is a scatter, and I'm going to connect that, and there it is. And I'm going to force the total count to 4, and I'm going to uncheck max relax radius, because if you have this, and let's say you have 10,000 points, it's just going to be like that, you know, evenly spaced out at least as much as you can. And if you increase this, it's just gonna, oh, sorry, not max relax radius, it's this one, relax iterations. So if I increase this, you can see it gets, it tries its best to evenly space it out. Okay, I don't want that, because it can slow it down, as well as I don't really need it because I only need 4 of these. As you can see, relax iterations versus no relax iterations makes a huge difference, but I only need 4, so okay, that's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these points and copy them onto, I'm going to copy this box onto these points. That's basically what I'm trying to do. Okay, copy 2 points then. Okay, so this is geometry to copy, which is that one, and the target points is right here. Okay, so if I now look at the cam, there it is, sitting right there. Okay, but what I want to is not that. Therefore, because there is, this box is already sitting at ground level, that's why it's kind of moved up. So I'm gonna kill this so it goes down. All right, we connect that here, and I'll see here. Here's the problem. You've got a big box. We don't want that. Okay. What we want is each and every single scatter point must have its own Axiom source. Please be careful. I think the maximum number of Axiom sources is, I think, 256 in total. But because we're only having 4 here, it shouldn't matter. Okay, but we don't want that. We want this kind of thing 4 times. Okay, we don't have that yet, but what we can do is use a for each point. I'm just gonna put it down here and connect that to here. So I've got 4. Okay, and I'm gonna copy this there and put that in here and disconnect that and connect that in here. So, okay, I think I might have confused you there, but let me just set this up properly. So all I'm doing here is that I'm putting these copy to points and the Axiom source shape inside of the for each loop. So for every point that comes in, the box get copied and converted to Axiom source shape. So you get 4 boxes instead of 1 big box. Okay, that's all I was doing there, and I'm just gonna push this out to there. Okay, good. So if you select all of these nodes and press A and hold and click and drag, you get that. Okay, nice one. I'm also going to do that here, arrange them nicely so it's easy to maintain. Okay, So what do we have? So if I now press play, nothing is going on this. I need to get rid of that. And what is happening? So as you can see, the source is actually outside of this box here, which is no good to us. Okay, so why is that happening? That's because of this grid being present elsewhere. So I'm just gonna check what's happening with this. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move this box slightly on this side here. There you go. So these little boxes and the Axiom sources are actually inside of our sync box, okay, or the domain box. Okay, that is good. All right, I think we're good to go here. So if I now press play, there you go. It starts to work beautifully, just great. But this is not what we want. Okay, so what we want instead is this. Go to scatter and change the global seed to at frame. So every frame your scatter points change. So these 4 points are here at the moment. Next frame it changes. It just constantly changes. Okay, and that is exactly what we want. So now if I hit play, you can see what's going on. So what's happening here is that these scatter points are generating these boxes, which are in effect our source, which in turn creates this beautiful plume looking smoke. And some of these have higher temperature than the other. And that's why if a point occurs in frame number 4 and in frame number 5 at the exact spot or close enough spot is another point that comes in, what happens is the temperature increases because it's getting added. Okay, and that where is it? You can see here sourcing, the temperature is getting added at 1.25, and that's exactly why we're getting this. And this is the beauty of this wonderful smoke. And I think we are pretty much done here. Okay, so what I'm going to do though is that I don't want to render it like this. Okay, I want to push the camera upwards a little bit so we don't see this sourcing happening. For example, if I were to move to number 2, okay, so there you go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this camera upwards a little bit. Translate. There you go. But because we move the camera upwards, now we need to change our sync box. Okay, so because that box is now down here, just change that up there and push this to the side here. We don't need that much on this side, but I'll just give it anyway. Just ensure the front and back have enough space. Okay, so pretty much like that. So I'm just gonna go this to 0. Yeah, I zeroed that out. That's okay. And this one, I'll round it up to 5, for example. I think it pushed the bottom up a little bit, but that's okay. And this one would be -6. I think that is good. Maybe I'll make this 8, this one to 12, this one to 17. So it's easy for you to copy at home. So let's check out the camera again. I think that looks pretty good. Just want to move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, I think that's pretty good. With the Axiom solver, you know, it's actually very, very fast. So you don't need to put a lot of effort into this. But anyway, let's see. So let's see what happens here now. Okay, so I'm at frame number 79. It looks beautiful, and you can see that the density is being injected in, you know, all the time because of these number of coins that are coming in, and that is a typical characteristic of a gasoline fire, particularly aircraft gasoline fire. I keep saying this, But I also noticed some kind of problem here. It looks like mushroom or it kind of cut off. So I'm just going to check what's going on here. Ah, there you go. It's because we don't have enough space in the front. That's why that's getting cut out. All right, so we need to change this. And it looks nice, though. If that's what that's what you're going for. But I don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. Just going to pull it in a little bit. And it brings it to, I think this one's 18 now. And this one will be 13, 0 center, -4. Okay. It's time to try it again. Okay, so I'm at the same exact frame, 79 here now. Okay, so that looks a lot better, and it's not cutting, which is good. As you can see, the outside here is the actual domain limit, and this little box here is where it is currently at. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to change the background to dark right now, just to have a better visualization. There you go. I think that looks pretty sweet. So we're going to move on to rendering now. Okay. But before that, I need to cache some of this. So I'm going to go ahead and cache this and I'll come back. So what do we got here at 0.04? That's pretty good. I'm just going to cache about 120, all right, frames, because I don't want more than that. So I will cache it and I will come back. Okay. Okay, 120 frame sims done. It took about 3 minutes. That's not a lot. Original simulation was 480 frames. So this is, but it took much longer. But for some reason it did much better now. So I don't know. But the flipbook took a little bit longer. Maybe it's because I'm recording. I don't know. But here it is anyway. Check it out. I think that looks pretty cool. So, as I mentioned before, I'm going to change this, increase the speed by 25%, making it approximately 30 frames per second. Okay, so it goes a little bit faster. So this sort of plume thing actually looks much better. Okay, originally in the video, I actually started my simulation at frame number 120. Okay, so because I wanted to give myself enough time so that the fire looks like it's already there and it's going on and whatnot. But anyway, look at this part here. It looks gorgeous. I think just around here, this particular plume goes up like that. That is, I think, is pretty good. And this is the beauty of the scatter and changing global seed per frame. Okay. So I think I am pretty happy with it. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to render frame number 100. Okay, let's go ahead and set that up. By the way, the file you'll find on gumroad.com will be the original. Okay. All right, and let's go into out context and put in a karma node. There it is. And I'm going to change this straight away to XPU. Okay. By the way, if you don't have a good GPU and if you think that CPU is better for you, then you don't have to use XPU Pyro Preview material. You can just go with the Pyro Shader material. Okay. But this one is XPU. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit Karma Viewport. Before I do that, let me save it and Karma Viewport. This is the new feature, I think it came out in 19, where you can actually use karma from the out context. Previously, you have to go through stage context to do it. They made it better for a lot of people. I still think using stage context is actually beneficial, just to get an understanding, because I think going forward, we'll all have to move to stage context eventually. Right, so something is going on, but it's not really working very well. So let's see what's happening. That rendered really fast. but the reason why it's not working is this. So you got in here, Power Big Volume, you set up a new Karma Pyro preview, okay, which is the XPU version. But what we forgot to do was assign that material here. Okay, so we need to assign that material here, and now hopefully that should pick it up. There you go. Okay, good. I'm just gonna go back to the camera, and I'm gonna change the viewport to dark, which is kind of annoying because I would prefer it to take the background setting from here, but it doesn't do that at the moment. Okay, so there you go. Just gonna. Okay, so there it is. Even the first try, it looks amazing. I think I don't need to do much here, except for motion blur. Okay, because we got everything set up. As I mentioned before, if you're happy with this, pretty much is what we're going to get here. You know what I mean? So I think we got that. I think that's looking pretty cool. All right, so the next thing is the velocity. Motion blur. So I want to check here, right? If I click on the eye here, it's going to, by the way, show this error message or warning saying the default assigned material has been changed and the parameter values might not reflect the render result. That's because we chose the XPU Karma, okay? That's why, but ignore that because our render looks darn good. What I wanted to check was this, right? So checking for velocity, it's there, which is good. That's what we want for our motion blur. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this for now and go to out context. I'm going to reduce this as well. Go to out context and click a render to endplay. So it's there for us to compare. Okay, the rendering is done, and you can tell it actually took 3 seconds. Like it's awesome. But you notice this error here on the Houdini console. That's because I have redshift. Okay, so I'm not sure why it's keep coming up, but anyway, I'm gonna ignore that, and I'm gonna go ahead and do the other one. So I'm gonna minimize this for the moment. I'm gonna go ahead and check what's going on here. So to enable motion blur, you need to go to Render tab on the geometry context and select the actual container. And go to sampling and choose velocity blur. That's the first step. And then you want to double check you're getting velocity here. And I also changed that output setting to velocity scale. Output velocity scale setting to 1/1. Okay, that's important. And finally, in the out context in Karma itself, what you need is, I think it's in camera effects. Yeah, there it is, motion blur. Okay, so as you can see, volume velocity blur is 1 here, okay? And you can actually change that. But I'm also going to enable these velocity blurs, okay? I don't think we need that, but I'm going to enable that anyway. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to hit render again so we can compare the first image to the second. Okay, the rendering is done. It took 7 seconds this time, okay? And here's the difference. I think you can see a little blur, maybe here. If I zoom in right there, you can see. I think that's pretty good. What I want to do though is I don't want volume velocity blur of 1. I want to change it to 1.1, and that is because I increased the speed of the simulation to 1.1. You don't necessarily need to do this, but I felt 1.1 was a much better result, gave me a much better result than 1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit another render, and let's check it out. Okay, so rendering took 7 seconds, which is good. So there's the third one versus the first one. So you can see here, third versus first, and then the second, and then the third. You won't see much difference from the second to the third, but maybe in the smokes or a different frame. Okay, let me just try a different frame here now. Maybe when it's rising up, like, I don't know, 60. Okay, so that is where the velocity maybe is it's a little bit higher. Okay, so there's that frame number 60 here. Okay, so I'm gonna put this to 0 and I'm gonna render it again just so that we can see the difference between 4 and 5th frame with velocity 1.1 and 0. Okay, so there you go. You can see here, right at that spot right there. This is no velocity blur. This is velocity blur. No, yes. No, yes. No, yes. Okay, good. I think you got the point. All right, I'm gonna close this. I think we are pretty much done here with Houdini. I just want to go through my After Effects project file. I'm not gonna actually do the compositing, but I will go through the file itself so that you have an understanding of how I got the result. Okay, but as far as Houdini and Karma is concerned, it's done. Okay, let's move on to After Effects. So okay, here is the After Effects file, and the render you see here is the original render. Okay, not the tutorial render, but either way, it's exactly the same. Okay, so I have 3 elements here. One is the Karma Fire raw output. Okay, so basically I just got a raw output of the actual render. The most important thing here is that you need OpenColor.io plugin, which is available for free. I'll leave a link in the description to download that for you. Okay, you can get that for free, and then download the ACSCG color config, which is also for free. I'll leave a link in the description for that too. Okay, so the input space is CG, ACCG, and the output space is sRGB. So I've checked use GPU, no big deal. And this is the basis of the other 2. Okay, so the other 2 are, one is against a black background and another against a plate. That could be any plate really. I used this one, looked pretty cool. Okay, so by the way, I will give you the After Effects file as well in the along with the project files, but you will not get this plate here because I can't give you that. That's from a texture map, texture pack that I bought. All right, so let me go through this fire comp here first. So basically what's going on is that I'll just disable this. I have 2 Karma fire comps. Okay, inside, if I dive inside of this, I have this, basically what I have here, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and close that, but on the outside I have a bunch of plugins for that one as well as for the second one. Okay, so let me go through the first one and let me increase the opacity to 100. Okay, so this is the final result. So without it, it's just basically the same as this one. All right, except that one. Yeah. So if you look at these 2, if you look at these, that one and this one, they're identical. All right. So I wanted a glow because this looks great, but fire needs a glow. Okay, simple as that. So I added a first glow, which is very subtle because the glow intensity is 0.2. But if you notice, the radius is 400. Okay, and the second glow, the radius is 800, but the threshold is 27.5. What does that mean? Glow threshold represents the amount of intensity to look for the glow. So the lower this is, the lower values it's going to look for. For example, for 27.5, this might be looking at places like this as well. Okay, but for 80% threshold, it'll only be looking at hot places. Okay, and this is a very subtle effect. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see the difference. All right, and number 2 here. Okay, and if you notice, the first one is based on the original colors. Okay, and the second one is based on A and B colors. Okay, and that's important because if you change this to original colors, it'll be blown out completely and I lose all the beautiful colors I got from the original render. Okay, so that's why I used A and B colors, and I set the colors, the dark color to the dark range here, and the light color to the lightest range here. Okay. And then I got levels, and the levels are to basically bring some detail out of this blown out areas here. Okay. So without it, with it. And that's the setting here. So you've got a gamma of 1.35. So if I were to drop this down to 1, it'll just go back to how it was, except the output white is 0.9. Okay. So if I change that to 1, it'll all be blown here. Okay. So I brought that down and reduced the contrast a little bit. Okay. And then I also added a hue and saturation. So because it was a little too red for me, so I changed it. Shifted the hue a little bit, like 4 degrees, so it looks more yellow. And then I tinted it. Tint is basically saturation, but tint works a lot better, and I'm a big fan of this plugin. All of these are inbuilt plugins. You don't need anything else. I gave 5%. Without tint, with tint, you don't really see much of a difference. And then finally, I applied LUT, a lot lookup table. And for this one, I used Portra 800 cube. Now, you will not get this particular lot anywhere except if you own Redshift. Okay, so you can try other lots, you know, see how it works. But this, unfortunately, this one, I think you should own Redshift for this. Okay, right. So, and then I also attempted a second one here. Okay, which I'll explain as well. So the second one is pretty much the same, and except both of these glows are A and B colors, and the glow intensity is 1 on the first one and 0.3 on the second one. Okay, so if I now just kill all this, okay, and if I see, you can see this is the glow that comes up because it's 80, and then the second glow is at 25%, and it picks up a lot more. But both of these, even with the glow intensity of 1, it still looks similar color to what I had originally. Okay, without them and with them, pretty close. And then I introduced a glow number 3 to make it even brighter, or for the glow to expand outwards. But this time the intensity radius is 1000 and the intensity itself is 0.2. That's 0.3 and that's 1. But all of them are A and B colors. They are not original colors. Okay. And then, as usual, the levels. So I should have left the maybe I should have left the gamma as it is, but I didn't. So I kind of uncontrasted it a little bit, and then I brought the brightness and contrast back in and increased the contrast. Well, okay. And then I put in the hue. But this time I went negative, so I wanted more red. Okay, and I added a little bit of tint here, only 1%, literally nothing. And LUT is the same as previous. Now, I liked this as well as this one. Change it to. Oh. So I liked this one as well as this one. This one. Both had an advantage and a disadvantage. Okay, this one I like the colors a lot, but it's kind of blown out here. This one is not blown out, but I'm not a big fan of the colors themselves, like the other one. So what I did was I added them too, and brought the opacity down to 50% on both. So I got the best of both, effectively. Okay, so the next one is that the dark orange solid. I just put in as a composite, and I picked up one of the colors out of here. Okay, and I added that to give it a little more glow to it. Okay, so without it, with it. That's basically it, and I added my logo into it. So, okay, so that is the comp behind a black background. The most important thing I forgot to mention is this. Where is it? Here. So if I right click and go to interpret footage and main, you see alpha is ignored here, and that's imperative. If you don't do that, you will not get this or if you do pre-multiplied, you get a different result, as you can see here already. Okay, straight is not bad, but ignore is a lot better. Okay, because I'm using it against a black background, alpha didn't matter. Okay, so it's okay. However, if you want to put this fire against a plate, then you will need alpha. All right, so next setup, which is the alpha setup. Okay, so with this one, so the first thing is that if I right click here and interpret footage, it's actually pre-multiplied. All right, so if I go ignore, your background is lost. Straight, you get this. Pre-multiplied, you get a lot more. Okay, so that's what that is. So I'm just gonna disable that for now, and let's jump into this Karma Fire Alpha Pre-Comp 2. And these two are pretty much what I explained here. Okay, except I can't have 50% opacities on these two. I can't have 50% opacities on these two and add them together, because if you do that, this is the result you'll get, and that's no good. Okay, that's why you see it's both opacities 100%, but it's in a screen mode. Okay, if you put into add mode, everything will get blown out. That's why you got add mode, but the rest of the things are pretty much identical. I don't think I actually changed it at all. Might have changed maybe the no, doesn't look like it. No, everything looks the same to me, but that's the difference. All right, the difference being obviously you got an alpha here. Okay, so if I go in here, there were nothing here. What is also really important is that you actually convert it to sRGB first. Okay, if you don't do this, the plugins will have different impact, different effect. Okay, so that's that. And I ignored the dark orange solid because if I add that, I'm gonna no, not that one. I'm gonna lose my background unless if I may be able to add it. I could have done it, but I didn't. There you go. Oh. Okay. So, and then I added my logo in there. Not logo, but my company name. So that's basically my Aftereffects. Wow. So hopefully you like that one. There you go. I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so hopefully you learned something. You liked it. If you did, please give me a like, thumbs up, comment, subscribe. Check out my Gumroad page, as well as there is a super thanks available now on my YouTube page. If you feel generous, please do so. If you don't want to buy my Gumroad project files, you can do this as well. Until next time, have fun. See you. Bye.